Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
There's a shot in the movie which I'm so thrilled about, which is the shot where David takes out Goliath. The challenge with that was, how do you make it really feel like it was God that had the victory, not David's skill? And when you watch the movie, I think you'll feel that we nailed it. Because we're so clearly saying this was God. And likewise with this movie, we feel we're flinging the stone, and now it's out of our hands, and whatever it's going to do from here, we can just sit back and watch and hopefully wonder at what it does out in the world.
His name is Brent Dawes, and he is the writer and co-director of the new David film, which hits theaters just before Christmas. We are so thrilled to have you as our guest on the Passion Meets Purpose podcast.
Thank you. So excited to be here. This is going to be fun.
So you and I met in sort of an unconventional way. It was so fun. We were in the same row at a Phil Wickham concert. You sat next to the husband of my coworker, Donna, and he struck up a conversation, and all of a sudden he points at you, looks down the line to me and goes, "This is the writer and director of the David film."
That was so fun. It was such a great way to meet some new people.
I instantly tried to start interviewing you. I was like, yelling down the row, "What is your hope for this film?"
I know, it was so wonderful. I loved it. I love that you just went straight there.
Well, I wanted to know, and then I figured, this is probably not the best venue for such questions, as you were shouting over whatever else was happening in the background. And so we decided to find a time where we could really just dive in depth into not only this film, but more of your story. So I'd like to actually start at the beginning. Can you share a little bit about your upbringing and maybe even pieces of how the way that you create stories and animated films, do you see a seed of that in your childhood?
Definitely. So yeah, we chatted just before we came on, and you said you scoured me on the internet and could find nothing. So this becomes ground zero for Brent's background. So I was born and grew up in Zimbabwe, which is in the southern Africa, and always loved creativity, always loved storytelling. I always wanted to actually either be an actor or be an animator or do comics. But in Zim, there's not a lot of opportunity for these things. In fact, there's a lot of opportunity to play outside and for your imagination to be the thing that you play with. Because I was always jealous of people who grew up in America or England, because they had comics and they had access to all these things, which I didn't as much. And when you got hold of something like that, you would devour it. So I grew up drawing my own little comics. I got my dad's camera, did some stop motion animation myself, tried to make some movies with my friends. Always wanted to be creating or doing stuff like that. But what I found very interesting about my trajectory within that is, so as I grew up, the thing that landed for me was like, I want to be an actor, I want to go to Hollywood, and I want to be a star. So I went to South Africa and studied drama there at a college in South Africa. And this was also early in my faith. So I became a Christian when I was a teenager. And when I started studying drama, I joined a church that I really resonated with. And what I found really fascinating is, halfway through my second year of studying drama to be this actor, and I told my friend, I was like, I'm going to be in Hollywood by the time I'm 26 and I'm going to be famous. Halfway through my course, I woke up one morning and the desire to act had gone. It had left me. And it wasn't something that I laid down. I didn't sort of pray anything the night before or hand it over. I just woke up and I was aware that it was gone. And it was the most normal yet odd thing, because from a child, this had been my dream and my desire. And now it was not there. And I was like, this what do I do with this? It was fascinating. But I had so connected with the church that I was at the time that I was like, well, I'm really enjoying the church, so I don't want to go back to Zimbabwe, so let me carry on studying drama. I actually still find it fun. I still enjoy performing and find it fun, but I don't feel that that's my future anymore. And I've got no clue what that means. So then I stayed in South Africa and carried on studying and got more involved in the church. Then I thought, I really felt like God was calling me to the ministry. It's like, okay, so I'm going to plant churches. It was a very missions oriented church that would plant churches. And so I was like, well, that's me now. That's going to be me. And when I finished drama, one of our lead pastors had gone and planted a church in Los Angeles. And I kind of felt a stirring within myself. It's like, you need to go there. Go and be with him at that church. And I was like, okay, yes, I'm a very belief-led person. So if I feel something, I'm going. So I went across. I didn't get hold of him, didn't tell him or anything. I just told my parents, and they were fine with that because they also gave my sister a gap year after studying. And they said, okay, well, off you go have your adventure. So off I went to America. I didn't even know where the church was, honestly. It was in LA. This was before the internet was a big thing. So I landed in LA, and I have an uncle there, and he picked me up. And while I was there, I tried to find the phone number for this church. Eventually managed to get hold of it, found out where it was. It was in Orange County, and then got hold of the church. I was like, hey, does anyone have a place that I can stay there or whatever? They said, yes, someone's put a thing on the billboard, a room to rent. So I got hold of them, and I said, can I rent a room? And so this was all just blind. So I arrived at this person's house, and it was so funny because after I'd been there a while, they said, Brent, we didn't know what to expect because they only heard my voice beforehand and they knew I was from Zimbabwe. So they said, we need to confess that when we heard your voice and heard you from Zimbabwe, we were expecting an African prince to arrive, which is not, which was not the case. So I didn't think they expected this white boy to come out of this taxi. But anyway, so then I went to the church, and I truly felt like there was going to be this moment where I walked
The
in.
name Brent didn't give it away?
I don't know, But anyway, I walked in the church, and I truly,
Brent.
I truly felt that the lead pastor was going to see me and say, God's told me you were coming, And so I went to the church for the first time, not having met anyone there, walked in and found out that the lead pastor wasn't there. He was away for 2 weeks. And I was like, oh, well, that's a bit anticlimactic. So I waited the 2 weeks, and I went to the church and just sort of socialized a little bit. Then when he came back, he preached, and I was like, here's my moment. At the end of the sermon, I went up to him. A number of people, often a lot of people go up to chat to the guy at the end of the sermon. So I waited my turn, and I was like, hey, I'm Brent, from Zimbabwe, but was at your church in Durban, and really felt to come here. And he's like, oh, wonderful, great to meet you, Brent, thanks for being here. And he moved on to the next person. I was like, that's also not what I was expecting. I was like, So then I thought, well, okay. So I sort of stayed in the States for 3 months, attending this church, set up, trying to plug in, but nothing really clicked in terms of purpose or meaning, and I couldn't understand it. So I ended up going back to Zimbabwe via England, where I tried to earn some money being a security guard for a little while, but that's a different story. Got back to Zimbabwe. Then the main lead pastor of the whole network of churches was running a conference in Malawi. And I had an opportunity to drive to Malawi to be with him there and a number of other of the lead elders and what have you. And I thought, okay, this is where it's going to unlock. I'm putting myself out there, making myself available. Went there, was with them for over a week. And again, nothing clicked. I resonated with them, but I was fully hoping for some sort of confirmation from their side that we see something in you, let's mentor you, let's do this or that. But it didn't happen. And you can't force that sort of thing, So I drove back to Zimbabwe after that, feeling very confused. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? because ministry hasn't unlocked and I don't know how to force that. I'm not going to go back to Zimbabwe and be an actor. That desire is still not there. So then I decided, while I was driving, I was like, what can I do? I was like, I think I could write adverts. So I started making up adverts in my head. So when I got back to Harare, long story short, I tried to get into advertising and got into advertising. That's the nice thing about Zimbabwe. If you show some sort of proficiency in something, you can make it. So got into advertising and did really well at it. I actually won Copywriter of the Year in Zimbabwe my first year, which is quite something, which
Wow.
was a lot of fun. But I knew that I wasn't home. I knew that that wasn't my calling, you know. But then I found out my brother-in-law was working on a project, which was a stop motion animated feature. And he was the art director on it. He was an accountant turned graphic designer who was now an art director on this project. I found out about it and they said, Brent, we're ready to make this movie. We don't have an animator. Do you want to come and animate on the project? And I said, yes. So I quit advertising, went and joined this project. And within the first moments of being there, I was like, I am home. This is where I'm meant to be. And that was Sunrise. And this was in the year 2000. This is 25 years ago. And so I animated, doing stop motion animation on that project, which I can talk to you more about if you like, but there's lots of stories here. So I want to just get to the end of the narrative of how I ended up where I am now. Finished, spent a year and a half animating on that project. Doing a stop motion animation cured us of ever wanting to do that again because it's very hard and very time consuming. And once that finished, Phil, who's the owner of Sunrise and so he's the owner of it. He is the visionary behind Sunrise, and I'll talk about him a lot coming up. He said to me, Brent, would you like to write and direct? Would you like to direct something? He said. I was like, no, I've got no desire to direct. I said, but I'll write something because I didn't know what a director did at this point. I was like, I didn't really understand it, but I was like, writing sounds fun to me. So he said, okay, go ahead. He said, write something and we'll make it. So I wrote something and someone else directed it. And I was like, that's not quite what I pictured when I wrote it. So then I wrote something else and someone else directed that. And I was like, that's not quite. And then I said to Phil, I was like, do you mind if I direct the next thing? And so I wrote another short and directed that. And I was like, okay, this is where I'm meant to be, you know? And what was fascinating to me about at that point, it became clear to me that the desire to be in the entertainment industry, which was for me to be in front of the camera and to be famous, was taken away from me. I was taken into the wilderness for a little while and brought back around and put the side of the camera that I'm supposed to be. And even begrudgingly, do you know what I mean? I said no to it. I was like, no, that's not what I want. That's not what I want. Actually, I think I can do that. Actually, I love this. Yes. You know, and so I found my place, which was wonderful. And I love that it felt like I was led there rather than forcing a fit, you know, trying to make something happen that wasn't meant for me. So I felt a lot of peace, a lot of gratitude. I've not for one day taken for granted the position that I'm in at Sunrise because it felt like I was led there and it was gifted to me. And I said, yes, and thank you. And I continue to do so. There, how's that for an overview?
Oh, it's fantastic. I'm just sitting here like on the edge of my seat, and I love the themes. I love the theme of being led there. I love the theme of recognizing this isn't it, this isn't it, this isn't it, and then I'm home. So I want to talk about that a little. Let's first talk about, I've noticed this theme in nearly every guest I've interviewed. There is a theme of being led into the wilderness. So you first have this idea of what you maybe are going to do. Maybe the Lord gives you a promise or a vision or something stirring inside. You get all excited. You think it's next because he told you about it. But then instead, you go in either an opposite direction or a confusing direction and you end up in the wilderness. Why do you think that's part of God's plan? What is he doing in that season?
I'm going to tell you a part 2 to that story, which I find a lot harder and more raw because I'm still walking it. So I think it's so my now answer is I think it's so that we cannot take credit. What do I know, right? And it's one of those things. The more you know, the less you know. The less you realize you know. And it's also to provide you with that contrast of the yes and the no. I think a lot of people that I come across live in the no out of fear. They carry on doing something that they don't feel called to, they don't resonate with, but they can't see the other side, and so therefore aren't willing to go. Do you know what I mean? It's scary. And the thing is, I also don't take for granted. I said earlier, it's like belief is important to me. I'm a belief-led person. So if I feel something, it doesn't, like, going to America, not knowing where I'm going. That's nothing to me. It doesn't scare me because, like, no, but I believe it. And even though it didn't work out, it's like, okay, well, it's a step, right? It led me here, which is leading me there. Yeah, but yeah, I've walked through another one through this project, which has been incredibly hard, and I don't know if we're gonna get there soon or or now.
Well, you're the storyteller. Would you like? I'm going to leave it up to you. It's speaker's choice. You can either kind of keep going chronological, and then go back to that
Mm.
piece, or you can tell it now.
Let's go deep now.
Okay.
Let's just go deep now so we don't lose it. But it does jump, it leapfrogs a lot of the story and a lot of the narrative, and it goes to something quite personal, um, as opposed to sort of talking about the fun of making a movie or things like that. Because there's so much to talk about with regards to that, and I really want to also have an opportunity to really honor the team that made this movie, because it's incredible. And I recognize that I'm talking about myself a lot. But I also know what I've learned and observed is that testimony is a very powerful thing, and you never know who it speaks to, and how it touches someone. And so this is testimony to be continued because I'm still going through this. So I've had a really challenging number of years. I've gone really, I'd say, the term crisis of faith. Really started to question a lot about faith, a lot about God, and really coming from a place like a really deep, pure place. Like, I want the truth. I want the truth. I want, like Jesus, I want you, and I don't want the nonsense, and I don't want. So I have found myself going on a very challenging journey where a lot of what I believed I recognized was actually learnt from patterning through the church, rather than me deeply taking hold of it and understanding it and making it my own. The way that I prayed, the way that I worshipped, a lot of how I believed, was repeating back what I had seen. It was a learnt thing, and I didn't resonate with that. And so I really started to question a lot of things, which was scary. But it was over 10 years ago that I was like, God, like, for real, like, deep down, my answer to you is yes. Like, it's yes. And I trust that you can lead me in a way that is authentic and real, that speaks to me, but I can't do what I've been doing. I can't pray the way that I've been praying. And so it's been a really challenging time. Um, and I'd say a wilderness time, like, that's expansive and very quiet. And when Phil first spoke to me about the story of David, he and I are very close, and we have kindred spirits, similar to David and Jonathan. And I've been very transparent with him through it. And I said, Phil, I was like, just by the way, I'm really struggling on the faith side. And I said, I don't know what I believe, and I said, and I need you to know this as I go into writing projects for you, because you need to know that I'm not sure what's going on, you know. And he was like, he's so wonderful, he's so graceful. He's like, thank you for telling me. But like, I believe God's got you. I believe He's leading you. I believe you're where you're meant to be. So let's keep going, you know. Um, and so as I came into writing David, um, it was in a place of not knowing, you know. And I actually think, and this is where I find it quite hard to sort of um, to marry this and to be okay with it, and I'll explain. I believe that if I had been in a strong place when I started writing David, that I would have thought that I knew what the movie needed to be, and I think I would have thought that I knew what the message would have to be, and I think that I would have tried to, with the best of intentions, preach to people what I believed through this movie. But the truth of the matter is, I didn't have a clue. I was struggling. I didn't know. So what I made peace with myself. Is like, Brent, you have been handed this. The best thing you can do is to honor Phil and to honor anyone who's going to watch it, is to be as authentic as you can as you go about writing this. Access the source material, find your answers there. Don't try and put anything of your own in here. Well, I didn't have anything to give, to be honest. And so I have spoken a lot about this, but apparently you can't find it on the internet because it's not there yet. But now it is. Um, is that I have felt, and I know Phil has felt as well, that this movie's time has come. It was meant to be now, and that we are custodians of it, and that it has been. It's for. It's not an accident that it was given to Phil as a vision over 30 years ago. You know, this guy growing up in Zimbabwe, the furthest corner of the world, you know, to create this incredible story. It really does feel like God, you know, uses the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. It really feels like Phil and like, it's like, hey, meet the foolish things. um, but being in that position of brokenness, of barrenness, I think allowed the story to be what it was meant to be. And I just tried to create space and allow for that to happen. And I truly feel that is what has happened. And I feel that if I weren't in this place, I don't think the story would have ended up being what it is. And as a result, this is my hope. So now going to probably what your last question is, or actually your first question, the first question you asked me when we were at the
Nice to meet
concert.
you. What's your hope for the film?
Yes, what is your hope for the film? My hope for the film is that it meets people where they are at. That everyone has got a story. Everyone is going through something. There are different moments in this movie, different songs that speak to different challenges, different trials, you know. And my hope is that as someone is watching, they get spoken to, and that they leave being sort of edified, encouraged, challenged, or whatever it may be. But may they leave not just entertained, may they also leave inspired.
As you were speaking, I was thinking also that, you know, in our weakness, because you really described writing this screenplay and directing the film and knowing the direction it was going to go, you were truly emptied of yourself. You say that you didn't have anything to give. And I actually find a commonality with what you're saying through a bunch of the artists that I interview on the station, on the radio station, worship music writers. So many of them. That's actually a prayer of Toby Max before he writes. He said, "Lord, empty me of myself, make me a hollow enough vessel for you to shine through." And that may not have been your prayer going in, but I heard a lot of themes throughout what you were saying of also writing from a place of having a bunch of questions and wrestling. And so many of the worship songs that we sing, that's where they originate. You know, maybe a artist is choosing to write a song about Matthew 6. Why should I worry? Because they are consumed by worry.
Mhm.
So you
Yeah.
write from a place. It makes perfect sense to me that you would write from a place of emptiness. What is that verse in scripture talking about? Like, um, working through we wrestle through fear and trembling. Like we wrestle through our faith.
Mhm.
I'm gonna have to look that one up. Work out our salvation with fear and trembling. Is that what it is?
That sounds good. The one that resonated with me recently when I was actually in Utah, um, the day after I met you, actually, this was I found myself. I went to Bridal Veil Falls, which is in Provo in Utah, and just went for a walk. Went for a little bit of a hike up the mountain, and on my way down, I found myself praying, and that's how it happens for me. I'm not very deliberate with it. If it needs to happen, it'll happen. And so I just found myself praying, and I found myself praying also for the first time, specifically in a long time, to Jesus, not just to the air. I was like, Jesus, we're having a talk now, and I was like, I believe, but I also really don't, and it was that scripture of, I believe, help me in my unbelief. It really was that. And I'm going to just fast forward to the end of this, because it was a really pure, just heartfelt, just prayer and cry of my heart, confession of unbelief. And God, I don't know the code. I don't know the right things to pray to, that you will unlock my spirit. Do you know what I mean? Like, I need you to lead me. Um, and I got down the bottom of the mountain and ordered an Uber to take me back. And up on my Uber thing, it popped up. It said, "Leave now to meet Jesus."
Wow.
Like the Uber driver's name was
Yeah.
Jesus, and it said,
Wow.
or I don't know how you pronounce it, but it was, and then it popped up again. It said, "Jesus is arriving." I was like, okay, so God's got a sense of humor.
He does. God has the best sense of humor.
I
Oh,
really
I
loved that.
love that.
I loved that.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
that's so beautiful. And obviously that's in the Bible because you and I are not the only ones that struggle with Jesus, I believe, help my unbelief. We are not like the Lord put that in there
mm,
so that we could grab a hold of it and actually have language to describe this feeling and these questions. Um, because when you really think about it, communicating with the creator of heaven and earth, and I think we need to have a healthy amount of what do I even know? I think that's the beginning
mm,
of it.
mm. Yeah. Over.
What?
I said
Over.
over. Like,
You keep trying to end it. The end
yeah.
again.
Go ahead.
Can you imagine if we just ended it there? What do we know? That's the title of this episode. What do we know?
Yeah. It would be so appropriate.
Um,
It's the one thing I learned, that I don't know anything.
I
Yeah.
think that's beautiful. Well, can you tell me maybe throughout I know you started writing this screenplay, the first draft of the David film. You wrote this 11 years ago. This is not something that just happened. This is
Yeah.
something that you held. And you mentioned how you think this film is here for such a time as this. Why 11 years?
So now I'm going to tell a little bit of Phil's story, because, like, this really is his, you know, it is his vision. Um, one of the reasons he started a film company was to tell this story. And he grew up again in Zimbabwe, and I'm going to tell it in his words. He grew up in nature, and when he was canoeing in the Zambezi, he fell in love with God, because he just saw how dynamic and creative and brave and amazing God was. And God wasn't a boring, stuffy headmaster. He was a lion, right? He was Aslan. Like, wonderful and terrifying and brave and fun and intimate, and all these things. And Phil really resonated with David in the Bible. And I know why, because Phil is very much like David. He is fearless when it comes to pursuing what he feels called to, and for what he feels led to. And the fact that David the movie exists is absolutely testament to that. um he originally wanted to do it as a live action because he loves Gladiator and Braveheart. So he was going to do like David as a live action. But Rita Mbanga and one of our producers and Phil's wife, Jackie, had been speaking to him about doing it as an animation. He resisted for a while, but then it landed with him and he was like, he suddenly realized, oh, wow, if we do it as an animation, it just opens up the audience so significantly. If we do it as a live action, it's going to be only for, it's going to be R-rated or whatever it's going to be because that's a rough story. If you make it animated, we can tell it for a family audience and it's just so much bigger, the audience. And then, so we just started. He said, Brent, will you write this? And I'm just going to give you the short version. I wrote it. There's a story behind that, but the short version is I wrote the first draft. And what that led to was he was able to use that as a tool to raise some funding to do a demo for the movie.
I want to
Go
pause you
ahead.
real fast because you casually mentioned we made a demo. For those that are not in animation, that's like $3 million to do just that, right? That's
Yes.
a big deal. Like, that's
Yes,
not just
it was no small thing. It was
no.
no small thing.
Yeah, so we can't just gloss over that.
No,
And that's a huge
it became,
investment without any promise of a return.
yeah,
You're not backed
yeah.
by, this automatic yes.
No, you're absolutely right. So I was fast forwarding to get to the point of why now,
Mm.
but let me pause and tell you a little story there is that, so we needed, um, I think it was $2 million or whatever it was to make this. Phil did not have that. The studio did not have that. And he was chatting with someone, a lady called Sinette, who he was very close with and in business with. And she was really intrigued and interested by the project and said, I will help you try and raise the funds for this. So they started on a journey together. It wasn't happening. And it was getting to the point where Phil was going to have to actually let staff go. We weren't working on David yet, but it's a tricky industry, this. But it was getting to a point where we really needed a yes or no. Are we going to do this or not? And Sinette was driving, and she had just got an answer from someone who had said, no, I'm not putting in the money. And so she was like, how am I going to tell Phil this, that he hasn't got the money? And she said she heard an audible voice in her car behind her that said, you do it. I can't remember the exact words, so she could correct me. But she looked behind her, and there's no one there. But it was, she heard, and so she phoned Phil, and she said, Phil, I've got the money. I don't think she even spoke to her husband yet. She's like, you can go ahead, I've got the money, because she felt led to put in that money. So yeah, that's not something to be glossed over. So so then through her act of faith and taking a step forward, we then had the money to do that that 5-minute short, which was a huge thing for us because we'd never done anything like it, but we believed we could. And we did, and then that was the thing that then gave Phil more wind in his sails. Every step we took sort of gave more legitimacy to the thing, and where he was able to get more interest on a funding side, more interest on creatives coming and joining the project. And what I observed was the project, again, it felt like it was meant to be. It felt like it had a gravity that started attracting and drawing people to itself, which was just so wonderful to watch and be a part of. And so then we went through another phase. COVID gave us a bit of a hiccup because we did start production and we had full funding before COVID, but then funding was paused during that, for, everyone understands all that. And then it picked up again, I think, with once we got started with Angel in 2022. And now we're making it. But to now just answer the question you asked, and you're welcome to ask me about anything else I've just said. Why now is when I was in the States doing recruitment for the project, I watched a movie called, this is in 2017, a movie called Arrival. And it was about aliens coming to Earth and stuff. It was a great movie. And in the movie, people didn't know what to do. And so people were talking and they were like, phone the president, he'll know what to do. And I felt within the room and within myself, no, don't call the president. Like, there's not many world leaders at the moment that I would call that I would trust to know what to do in the situation. And what I reckon, I was like, sure, it's for such a time as this that this project is coming about, because one of its themes, there's a number of themes in the movie. One of them is leadership and the difference between a shepherd leader, and so leading through love versus leading through fear, and I think by with this movie, we're presenting to people an alternative to what we're seeing in the world. This is what a true leader is. It is someone who serves, someone who shepherds, someone who does sacrifice themselves for the people. Do you know what I mean? And I think that'll be a like a wonderful taste in people's mouths.
Mm.
So that's one of the reasons why now I think the world needs it. I think we've lost sight of what true leadership is, and I think we could do with a bit of a reminder.
You're also talking about how many layers there are in the story of David. Interestingly, this is what the series that my church has been walking through for the past month so far. And just pictures of how, it's more than just the story of David and Goliath. It's more than just the story of David's victories. It's also his shortcomings. Can you talk a little bit more about who David is? And you were sharing one of the themes. Share more of the themes. This film is so multi-layered, which is fascinating to me as to how you weave those layers in the way that you have done.
It's been challenging, fun, and surprising, and insightful. One of the other key themes is faith versus fear, and I think this is also actually goes back to me going to America, or whatever. It's like, are you just gonna go, or like, how are you gonna live your life, and what I love about David is my read of him is he was not intrinsically ambitious. He said of himself, he said, there's only two things I want, is to dwell in the house of the Lord, and to be in his presence, or to seek his face. It's like, that's what he wanted. And that made it very challenging. We had a number of story people that kept trying to say, you guys, he needs to want to be king. He needs to want this. And we're like, no, that's not what we're reading in the Bible. We're going to, it's like, that's not, he wants to be with God. That's what he wants, and again, Phil and I were holding the line of trying to be true to what we're reading and not try and fit it into the 3-act structure that Hollywood movies have. A thing that I'm most proud of, not most, but a thing that I'm so thrilled with, is that we didn't look at other movies and try and do what they did. We looked at this story and tried to make it what it needed to be. And therefore, I think it feels fresh, So David, he wants to be with God. He doesn't want to be king. When he's anointed, it's like, but Saul is king, right? And David loves Saul, actually, and he's very loyal, incredibly loyal, and I love that about David. I love the fact that he's just pure in his motivation, and he let God be the one to take action. He was never going to kill Saul or things like that. And again, I think there's a lesson in patiently trusting and allowing the timing, to be right when something is supposed to come into your life, But again, it's the trusting and the being patient. And I feel like I'm starting to drift away from what you asked. So set me straight again.
We're just talking. I mean, sadly, we have to wrap up our time together. We just have a little bit more time together, but well, actually, you're in charge of that because I think I'm your last interview of the day. So you get to wrap it up when you're ready. But
Yes.
we're talking about the
Okay. I'll say over.
yeah. You'll just leave. You'll just log out.
Yeah.
Um, Okay, we're talking about the layers of this story, the ways that David is a shepherd leader, the way that Jesus is a servant king. We're talking about the overlap of looking through his story with the
Mm,
lens of the Messiah. We're talking about the ways that David got it right, the
mm.
ways that David got it wrong, and we haven't even touched yet on the musical aspect of this film, which I'm sure you have plenty to say about. I mean, if David wrote as many of the Psalms as he did, um, the music has to be excellent in this film. Yes?
Absolutely. Um, you're talking about, so I'm going to talk about the music now. So there are so many layers that have woven into this movie, some by design and some by complete surprise for us. I want to touch very briefly on the visual side of things. There, like Linton Levengood, our production designer, did such an incredible job of research and trying to make this as authentic and accurate as possible. He's doing some Instagram posts at the moment where he's telling people all the bits and pieces, all the little Easter eggs you can find, because we cared so deeply about this being as true as it could be. And so visually, there are incredible layers, in terms of the color choices are selected based on like God is represented by the color techelet blue, and so when you see this big blue sky, it means God, and golden light, and our camera choices, all sorts of things. There's so much richness and depth in the way that this movie has been crafted, and the team just bought into it. It was so wonderful. They all just piled in and made it their own. And I know we're short on time, so I'm just trying to rush to just mention that. But on the music side, and just talking about how some things layered themselves in that we didn't intend, and I only discovered at the end. As an example, with the songs, the very first song of the movie, the first line is "There's a light in the distance," and it's David is trying to encourage his sheep. There's a light in the distance, and he's talking about God, obviously. Then in the middle of the movie, the first line of the song that David sings is "There's a light I've always followed," and at the end of the movie, the last song, the first line is "The Lord is my light," and I only realized that well after the fact. And I just love that at the beginning, there's a light in the distance, and then in the middle, there's a light I've always followed, and then the confession of "The Lord is my light," which I find just wonderful, and you'll see also when you watch the movie, just the real. So you're talking about how David, is a precursor to Jesus. I can't remember what you said there, but absolutely the way that the movie ends, it lent itself to being very much like that. There's so much symbolism there, and again, that was just us allowing the space and allowing it to be what it needed to be. So yes, what I'm excited to say, it is multi-layered, and I don't think I even know how many layers there are. And that's why I'm excited for people to watch it, because I think they'll uncover and discover so many more.
I am too. I'm so excited for this. Well, you stole my final question about what your hope is for the film. If you missed it, go back to the middle of the episode when Brent answers it. So, I'm gonna let you have your parting thoughts. Anything else that you wanna say just about what you've learned about God's character through being invited into this project?
So like I said, as like my testimony is not finished, it is ongoing. And so what I can say at this point about the character of God that I see is that he is incredibly patient, and he's okay with you to be mad at him. And I think he encourages it, actually, because I think a lot of the being mad at God is not actually being mad at God. It's being mad at what we thought God was, or mad at that we didn't know, or something like that. I think my hope is that he's bigger and deeper and wider than I even am aware, and that my testimony ends with me at least catching a glimpse of that. Um, and I guess the parting thought is, seeing as we're talking about the movie again, we tried to make this movie for the world audience. We didn't want to preach to the choir. Obviously, we want a Christian audience to love it and embrace it and engage with it. But we feel it's timeless. We feel it transcends religion as well and culture. We feel that there's something for everyone in there. And if they catch a glimpse of God within that, then that is wonderful. But yeah, we feel like we have done our best to be custodians of it, and now it's a little bit like there's a shot in the movie which I'm so thrilled about, which is the shot where David takes out Goliath. The challenge with that was, how do you make it really feel like it was God that had the victory, not David's skill? And when you watch the movie, I think you'll feel that we nailed it because we're so clearly saying this was God. And likewise with this movie, we feel we're flinging the stone, and now it's out of our hands, and whatever it's going to do from here, we can just sort of sit back and watch and hopefully wonder at what it does out in the world.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Passion Meets Purpose podcast. Thank you to Josh Model, our show producer. Thank you to Lana Vegas, our scheduler and our guest coordinator. These episodes would not happen if it wasn't for them. And I would welcome it if you would take a moment to rate and review the podcast. It helps others to find it. Plus, it just makes the show better. And one of my favorite things is to hear from you on who would you like to be featured as a guest on this show. So you can connect with us at purposely.com. Thank you.